Welcome to Hancock's VMware Half Hour. And welcome back to another episode of Hancock's VMware Half Hour. Now, my apologies, I have been away for a few days. I've been in Edinburgh following I'm a lifelong fan of Marillion and Fish. And Fish is on his last ever retirement tour. So I spent a couple of days up in Edinburgh attending the conferences, attending the gigs in Haddington, Holy Haddington. And if you've never heard of Fish and if you've never heard of Marillion, then you're wondering what the hell they're talking about. Anyway, so in tonight's video, this one is actually a request. So this goes out to the Young Wolf 077 that commented 3 days ago on one of the videos that I've done. And you can see them there on the screen in our little mini series that we've been doing on how to series VMware Workstation 17.6.2 on Windows. We've done 1 to 9 parts. And when I did the first, did I do 3 or 4? When I did the first 3 or 4 videos, I picked some common Linux distributions. We did Ubuntu, Fedora 41, CentOS Stream 10, and we did Kali. And I was wondering whether or not that this one was going to come up. So in tonight's video, we're going to have a little look at ArchLinux, or Archibald Linux, that I'd like to call it. And that was actually basically requested from the Young Wolf 077. So the Young Wolf 077, this is for you, my friend, and thank you very much for the request, and thanks so much for watching the channel. So ArchLinux is, I suppose, quite specialized. It's a little bit different to the other Linux distributions because it doesn't actually basically come with a lovely interactive installer. So there's going to be an awful lot of commands that I'm going to be typing at the command line, for a better word. And even I, after all these years, have got a recipe that I follow, because otherwise I just get it completely beat on and it doesn't work. So I have a recipe of, I'm just looking here, 30. I have a personal recipe of 30 steps, 32 if you include the reboot, that works for me all the time. Now, I'm absolutely certain that if you follow these 32 steps, in fact, actually, there might be more than a few 32 steps, really. I thought I'd numbered them. Anyway, if you follow these steps in this video, that I'm sure that you will be able to install Archibald Linux on VMware Workstation 17.2. Whether it's Windows or whether it's Linux. And you could probably use these to install on VirtualBox, and you can use these to install on VMware vSphere as well. So without further ado, I'm going to connect to our Windows 11 desktop, and I'm going to start up VMware Workstation, and we'll get started. File, new virtual machine, typical recommended. I'm not going to use the installer disk ISO. In fact, actually, if I do, I've downloaded ArchLinux 2025.2.01. But if I actually basically plug that into the installer disk image for the easy installation, you will see that it fails, because it turns around and says could not detect which operating system is in the disk image, which isn't really a surprise. So we're going to carry on like we normally do, and we'll install the operating system later. So it's Linux. There isn't an entry for it, which I think probably scares some people. So there isn't an entry for it in the guest operating system list. So we're going to select other Linux 6.x kernel 64-bit. Followed by next. I'm going to call it Arch Linux 1. And again, I'm going to browse to our 4 terabyte folder, and I'm going to create Arch Linux 1, followed by next. I'm going to create a 100 gig disk. I'm going to store it as a single file, followed by next. I'm going to customize the hardware. I'm going to give this 8 gig of RAM. I'm going to give it 4 cores. I'm going to give it 1 processor, 4 cores. I need to specify the ISO. So there's our ISO. I'm going to leave it at NAT. USB control, I'm going to leave it present. Sound card auto detect, I'm going to leave that. And I'm going to leave display at the moment to used host setting. Not going to tick accelerate 3D graphics. The reason I'm not going to tick accelerate 3D graphics is that I've noticed that if I tick accelerate 3D graphics using VMware Workstation 17.6.2, there's a horrible lag that I'm seeing when I'm typing in the console, and I just hate it. It's horrible. And that appears when I choose the accelerate 3D graphics. And I still don't really know why ArchLinux, when I boot it, is still laggy, but we're going to get around that because I'm going to use PuTTY and SSH to connect back to the virtual machine once we've booted it up and got some networking, so that things can just happen a little bit quicker. So display's correct, sound card, that looks okay. There's one other thing I want to change. I'm going to click finish on that so it creates our ArchLinux. We're going to edit the settings again because what I want to do, I want to use UEFI. I don't want to use BIOS. And there are 2 different setups required between using UEFI and using BIOS in terms of the creating of the partitions and also the grub bootloader as well. So it gets a little bit more complicated, but again, don't worry, if you follow these steps in this video, I'm sure that you will be able to install ArchLinux on VMware Workstation. I've also got my friend up here running, which is Core Director, which is trying to keep the threads and the processes off those horrible bloody energy saving load of nonsense cores, save the planet, etc. Anyway, so UEFI, I think that was the only change that I wanted to make there, so I'm going to click OK. What I'm going to do, I'm going to see if we can expand this a bit so you can see things a little bit better. Just expand that out. So tell you what, why don't we go full dog's bollocks and we go full screen. Okay, so I'm now going to power on this virtual machine. There's our warning about okay, so you probably heard the boot, and you can see straight away that it's actually basically booted UEFI because it says so. Install medium x86_64 UEFI, but there's one check that I'm going to do anyway after it's booted, just to ensure that we are running in UEFI mode, or the virtual machine has booted in UEFI, so our computer supports UEFI mode. And again, that's because the partition types are going to be different to when if we use legacy boot or UEFI or EFI, the partition information is different. So I'm hoping you can see, and I will put the these notes, if I can, in the description. So I'm just basically typing ls space /sys firmware EFI and then EFI vars. And if we get a load of what looks like gibberish appear on the screen, then we have verified the boot mode, that we are running UEFI mode. And you'll see later on in the next couple of steps, when we started laying down partitions on the disk, why this is important. So the next thing I'm going to do, this reminds me of the old days. I'm not too sure how many of you watching this channel remember the old days of DOS. But this reminds me a bit like that when we had DOS machines all those years ago. In the config.sys, we had to basically load up a keyboard driver, specifically for the keyboard mapping for our PC. So I'm using a UK keyboard. So I actually basically want to load the UK keyboard map. So again, I'm using the command load keys space /USR /share /KBD, and there's key maps. Can you see what I'm saying about how slow that this it is? You know, it's just about bearable. i386 QWERTY with a Y. Now, at that point, if I was to hit tab, it says, do you want to see all possible 26 entries? So those are all the key maps that actually basically exist. So if you've got a specific key map that you want, like US or DK, if you're in, or CZ, then you would actually basically specify that file. So I'm going to specify uk.map.gz, followed by enter, and that's it. So there's one other thing that I actually basically want to do. I just want to check that we have currently got linux.org. I mean, I'm typing, and I'm typing faster than that. I do apologize. Okay, ping. Oh, hang on, it's because I typed it wrong. ArchLinux.org. I'm hoping that I actually basically get a response back. So that actually basically confirms that, one, I've actually basically got internet connectivity, and I've also got DNS working, and I've actually basically got some networking. Now, if I basically type IP ADDR, and that also shows me that 192.168.189.145 is the IP address of this particular host. So there's one other thing I'm going to do. I'm just going to, as I said, I just hate this lag. If somebody's actually got any ideas how we can cure this lag, then drop a note in the description, because I fiddled around and fiddled around. It's only ArchLinux. Whether it's that kernel option and VMware Workstation 17.6.2, and it does only appear to be 17.6 that's causing this. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to type systemctl. This is my workaround. Start SSHD. That's actually now going to give me SSH. And what I'm going to do, I'm going to be crafty here, and I'm going to run. I thought I had putty. I'm going to run the putty app, and I'm now going to. What I might have to do. That's the wrong IP address. 192.168.189.145. Okay, so putty is actually basically responding. We've got an SSH connection, but I've not actually basically changed the password yet. So I'm going to change the password for root. It's just so slow. It's just right. So I've changed the password for root there. So that will enable me. Hopefully, there we go. So what I'm going to do here, I'm just going to change the appearance, so you can. Let's just beef up the apply. Hopefully you can see that a bit better. I'll tell you what we'll do. We might as well go full screen dog's bollocks for the moment, because we've got an SSH connection now into our virtual machine, which is running NAT. So 192.168.189.145. I can now drive, and I can do all the configuration that I need to do through this SSH session. And then later on, basically, we can shut down and reboot, and then I can actually basically show you that we do have a working virtual machine. So I'm going to carry on now. See, I can quite easily cut and paste. So the first thing I want to do is I actually basically want to set this virtual machine to do NTP, because of course you have to remember that virtual machines don't actually have their own clock. So by quickly going off and getting it basically to do an NTP request to internet-based NTP server, we can actually basically get the correct time. Now, you just sit there, watch that time, because I just need a swig of an espresso a minute. I've got banana here somewhere as well to eat. Here. While we wait for things to happen. Right. Okay. So our time is correct, 2013 UTC here in the UK. So I'm actually basically just going to repeat and start the SSH server. I've changed the password already, but one of the other things I actually want to do is I want to. I'm just going to. The other things I actually want to do is I want to change the mirror list repos on our installation, and again I'll put this in the description. So we go to archlinux.org/mirror list and you can actually, I want to use HTTPS, so I've ticked HTTPS IPv4, and I'm going to go down to United Kingdom. I'm going to say generate list, and then this is the list of mirrors that I'm going to use in our just checking. Yeah, this is the list of mirrors that I'm going to use in the file etc/pacman.d/mirror list. So we just go back to our putty session. So I'm going to use nano. I think we've got nano here, and I'm basically going to okay, so I don't really want to use any of those there. So I'm going to use all these repos. So you can do exactly the same thing. You can find the repos that you want to use. Use the ones that are closest to you. So I'm just going to save that mirror list. Okay, so we have now updated our mirror list, because when we actually start installing the packages in a minute, it's going to go off to the internet. So that's why basically I checked that we had DNS working, we've got an IP address, we've got access to the internet, because if you've not got any of that, then Pacman, which is the equivalent of apt-get or DNF that you've seen me use in the other versions of our videos for different versions of Linux. In Arch, we use Pacman to manage our packages. So the next thing that we need to do, and this is where things maybe start getting a little bit complicated, although as I said before, if you follow these steps exactly as I'm showing you, you shouldn't really get into any problems. So we have a 100 gig virtual disk in this particular VM, and it's device dev/SDA. And we want to create 3 partitions, SDA1, SDA2, and SDA3 on our virtual disk. The first partition is going to be our FE partition or UFE partition. And that's what I was saying to you earlier on about checking to see whether or not that we were booted into UEFI or we'll be doing legacy boot, because the partitions are set up differently to whether or not that you're going to use UEFI or whether or not that you're going to use legacy BIOS. And I thought just really for completeness and to make things a little bit more complex in this video, that we would actually basically follow and do FE partitions, which I think is a little bit more modern now in 2025, that we get used to using FE partitions, UEFI partitions, rather than standard legacy boot. So I'm going to do fdisk fdisk, again, you know, is a leftover really from those DOS days, where it allows us to create partitions on disks. So I'm going to do an fdisk dev /SDA. And now basically we're just going to basically use some single letters. So the first thing I'm going to do is G to create a new partition. It's a GPT partition, which is required for FE or UFE. So the partition number I'm going to create is partition number 1, which it says the default. The first sector I'm going to use of the disk is the default 2048, and I'm going to create a 512 meg partition. Doesn't need to be very big because all it's really going to contain is the UEFI stuff that allows us to boot our machine. So I'm going to click plus 512 meg followed by enter. So it now actually tells me that it's created a new partition 1 of type Linux file system and of size 1512 meg. Now we need to basically change the type. So I already know that it's 1 for UEFI, so it's changed the partition type Linux file system to FE systems. Now don't forget, because I normally do, we need to hit a W to write that partition. So there we go. Syncing disk, the partition table has been altered. We now need to repeat exactly the same again, but we now need to create a root partition on dev SDA2. So again, I'm going to say N. The default partition is number 2. There wasn't really any need for me to enter 2, but it's just, I'm an old fart and it's just habit really, to be honest, more than anything. So again, I'm going to use the first sector and I'm going to hit enter. This time I'm going to say plus 75 G for 75 gig. So our root partition is going to be 75 gig. So again, I'm going to hit enter. So it's already said create a new partition type 2 of type Linux file system and of size 75 gig. So that's what I want. Again, not forgetting to hit W to write. So I've hit W to write. Now, finally, we need to create a third partition for our home partition. So again, I'm going to hit N. I'm going to hit 3, but I could have just hit the enter key. First sector, I'm just going to hit enter, and I'm just going to hit enter again because I just want to use the remainder of the disk. So it's going to create a new partition 3 of type Linux file system and of size 24.5 gig. Don't forget, I need to hit W. Now let's just go back and do fdisk-L, and you should be able to see now, before we go any further, we've got a dev SDA1, which is our FE system. It's our 512 meg partition. Dev SDA2, which is our 75 gig partition. Dev /SDA3, which is our 24.5 gig partition. So we've got our FE boot partition, we've got our root partition, and we've got our home partition. And that's all we've got at the moment. Now, they're not really any good at all unless we format them. And these are the commands I'm going to use to format them. And I'm just going to cut and paste them as is. So mkfs-fat-f32 /dev /SDA1. So that's our boot partition, our UEFI partition formatted. And the next two partitions, I'm going to format as ext4, which is a Linux file system. So mkfs-ext4 again /dev /SDA2. There is a space there between the 4 and that. So there we go. That's formatted. And finally, I'm going to format the final one, which is dev SDA3, followed by enter. So there we go. Our 3 partitions, SDA1, SDA2 and SDA3, are now all formatted. So now that we've actually basically applied a format to them, we can start doing stuff. But the first thing I want to do is I want to mount them. And I want to mount them so that I can actually start copying stuff to them. So I do that by using the command mount /dev /SDA2. So that's the partition I want to mount. And I'm going to mount that on the path /mount. I'm now going to create a home directory folder. So I'm going to do mkdir space /mount mnt /home. I do apologize for those that have already done this and you know what's coming, but for those that haven't, just bear with and follow exactly what I'm telling you and exactly what you're seeing on screen. This is the recipe that I use and it works for me. So again, mount space /dev /SDA3 space /mount /home. So that's all our root and home directories created and mounted. Now here comes the fun. We're going to use the pack strap command. So it's packstrap -i /mnt, and base is the base package that we want to download and install in our root mount account. So packstrap space -i /mount base, and there are a few other packages that I want. Linux -firmware, sudo, nano, and vim. And I'm just going to hit enter. It's telling me that there are 2 providers available. I'm just going to install the default, which is number 1, followed by enter. And again, I'm going to basically enter number 1 for the default. And I'm going to proceed with the installation. And it tells us that the total download size is 558 megabytes. And the total install size is a gig. So I'm going to hit enter. I'm going to wait for that to do that. That can there is empty, so I'm going to open up my soft drink of choice. And actually, while I was in Edinburgh, I was drinking Iron Brew, and it's lovely stuff. I'll have to see whether or not I can actually basically get some here. So I'm just going to take a slurp of this. While it's doing that, and I notice that there's a jar of honey here. I don't know why there is a jar of honey on my desk. But anyway, if you like your honey and you're in the UK, or even if you're not and you fancy buying some honey, meltonbeehoney.com. There we go. There's a plug. And obviously they're from my bees. You know, it's not a jar of honey from supermarket. Okay, so that's completed. Completed in 22 seconds. CPU. Okay. So now we need to generate a fstab file, and really this just really, I suppose, maintains the layout in simple terms of our disk. So again, gen fstab space -u space -p /mount, and then just piping that then with greater than sign /mount, etc. fstab, followed by enter. The next thing I need to do is I need to root to the mount. So that's arch -ch root /mount, and this command really is sort of kind of now mapped in to that file system. So next thing to do really is to actually have a little look and set the time zone correctly. And you can use the time date ctl space list -time zone command. Now again, our time zone is Europe/London. So I'm going to link, so ln space -sf /usr/share /zone info /Europe /London space etc. local time zone. So we're just going to do that. And then finally, what I want to do, I want to update the hardware clock. Now, realistically speaking, it's like a virtual hardware clock. So the next thing we want to do is we want to, like in easier versions of Linux that have an installer, then you would actually basically type the home name in, the host name in, and it would set it for you. So here basically what we're going to do is we're going to echo the host name and pipe it to etc host name. So I'm going to call this VM ArchLinux, and that's that. And then we need to update our nano etc hosts. So, you know, I'm sure you're actually basically seeing here that, you know, Arch configuration, you know, there is no installer. We have to build the configuration manually ourselves. So I'm just going to copy and paste what should be in the host table here. So 127.0.0.1, which is our loopback address, tab ArchLinux, ::1, tab ArchLinux, 127.0.1.1 archlinux.cyrus-consultants.co.uk. That's the main name here, and again ArchLinux. So I'm going to basically just save that and say yes. I'm now going to enable the network manager. Now it's important to do this because if you don't enable the network manager, what's going to happen when you restart the virtual machine later, you will find that you don't have any network in your virtual machine. So make sure you download the network manager package. So I'm using pacman -s network manager, followed by enter. And again, I'm going to say yes, and it's going to go off and it's going to download all those packages. And don't forget to start it. So again, we're going to use a systemctl enable network manager. So basically that's going to create all the symlinks so that can start up with our virtual machine to allow us networking. So now we need some more packages. So again, pacman -s grub, because that's the grub package. FE boot manager, EFI boot mgr, DOS FS tools, OpenSSH, OS-prober, mtools, Linux-headers, Linux-LTS, Linux-LTS-headers, and finally Open-VM tools. Yes, there is actually a package for Open-VM tools. You know, if you just Google Arch Linux and Open VM tools, you know, you'll get yourself in a big mess because there are people out there telling us that we need to download from GitHub and compile and all this sort of kind of complicated stuff. It's not required. There is a package already. So I'm going to hit enter and I'm going to select yes. And that's now basically going to pull all that down from the internet. And that's actually basically going to compile and do stuff and write that to our mount directory, because that's what's currently mounted. So while that's doing that, I'm going to grab another slurp of coffee. It is getting late. I'm probably not going to be able to sleep tonight, but that was a double espresso. But to be honest, you really didn't seem an awful lot of liquid in there, to be honest with you. Okay, we're done. Okay, so now I need to set the locale. We do that by, well, the quick way to do it is by using sed, S-E-D, which effectively will replace the information. So sed space -i, quote symbol, s / hash en _us -utf-8 /en, and I'm actually effectively replacing it and removing the comment. So now I'm going to basically just run a command that says locale-gen, and that's going to generate the locales, and you can see there basically it says en _us -utf-8 done. We're going to do exactly the same thing with a configuration file for sshd_config. We're going to change, we're going to remove the hash so that we can log in as root. Now, I know some people would actually basically turn around and say that enabling root logon via SSH is a no-no, it's bad. Yeah, I would agree, but this is a lab. I wouldn't normally enable root logon in production. So again, we're going to do a systemctl space enable sshd.service. So that's going to create the symlinks. So that's going to boot up for us and start. So now we need to start making our UEFI boot directories. So I'm going to do an mkdir/boot/FE. And then I'm going to mount that, because now we are actually going to start using grub. So mount/dev/sda/boot/FE. And now we're actually going to install grub in FE mode. So I'm going to use the command grub-install --target equals x86_64-FE space -- bootloader -id equals grub_UEFI -- recheck. So any error messages here, and it's going to let us know. So it's installed the UEFI grub bootloader. I need to set the locale for grub, and I'm going to do that by using, I'm going to copy a file, cp/user/share locale /en @QUOT/LC_messages grub.mo, and then copying that to /boot grub locale en.mo. And now I'm going to actually write out the grub. So I'm going to use grub-mkconfig space -o /boot /grub /grub.cfg. And again, it's telling us it's found the Linux image, it's found the fallback image, it's added the boot menu for UEFI firmware settings. So we didn't get any error messages. I've got a warning there, but basically OS probe will not be executed to detect other bootable partitions. Like, you can, if you want, create a, I'm sure you've heard of dual boot with Windows and Linux. It's something really that I just hate and I don't do at all. I used to do in the old days. Now, when I say in the old days, I do mean about 30 something years ago, when they only had a single PC and I had to basically put Linux and everything. And to be honest, really, you know, ArchLinux does sort of kind of remind me of the old days in things like Slackware, which I think was one of the first versions of Linux that came around. So we need to create a swap file. So I'm going to use file locate -l 2g / swap file. I'm going to chmod it, so I'm going to set the right permissions on it. So I'm going to chmod 600 / swap file, and then I'm going to make the swap file. And then I'm going to add that swap file to our FS tab, which is what we created earlier on. So we're getting near the end. Keep the faith. I know it's an awful lot of text, but as I sort of kind of said to you before, you know, if you follow these step by step, these 30 to 35 steps, you shouldn't really get to any issues. So what I am going to do, I am going to add another user. So I'm going to add user add space -m -g users uppercase G wheel ADAPH. So that adds them to the wheel group. I'm then basically going to use PASWD, and I'm going to set a password on that user. Got that right. Now what I'm going to do, I need to make some changes to the sudo file to allow them to be able to use sudo. Otherwise, they're not going to be able to do an awful lot at all. So I'm just going to uncomment. There we go. So I'm just going to delete that. So if I uncomment, that uncomments to allow members of the group wheel to execute any command, which would be sudo in our case. So I'm going to okay. I didn't know if I was actually in. Couldn't remember if I was actually in Vim, Vi, or Nano there. Okay, so I think we're done. Whew. So finally, what we're going to do, we're now going to unmount all the. Going to exit, and now going to unmount everything that was mounted, and we're going to reboot. Finally, by just issuing the reboot command. Now that's going to drop the SSH session. So now we're going to go back to our. Okay, so here, this is back to VMware Workstation. This is the VMware Workstation 17.6.2 console. The grub worked because we've now got an option that says ArchLinux. So I'm going to hit enter. Loading Linux LTS, loading the RAM disk. It's checked dev SDA2. I've got a login prompt. So if I log in as ADAPH followed by the password that I entered, then I'm hoping that I got the password right and we're able to log in as that account. Okay, so our user that we created, ADAPH, works. We've logged in as that user. So can I now sudo su to root? It's not giving me any errors yet. And we're logged in as root. So just to prove, so I'm going to do an IP-ADDR and the password. The IP address is 145. So I think it is different to this one. So I'm just going to say new session 1992.168. 192.168. I was going to say this is a VMware Hancock's half hour, but this video has been going for 42 minutes. So it's either me waffling on or it just does take a little bit of time to get all these commands. 189.145 accept, and I'm going to use the root account. You may remember before I was saying that I wouldn't normally actually basically enable a root account. I've got the password wrong now, I think. I'm wondering whether or not that. Okay, so I think we've got a little bit of finger trouble here. Fat fingers on the keyboard. Let me just change the appearance again so that you can actually basically see the console. I'll see the putty session. So we just max that out. Root followed by the password. There we go. So that's it. Say this video has gone on a little bit. We're up to 43 minutes. What I'll do in the next video, because I'm sure this is going to come up an ass, somebody's going to turn around and say, but that's a horrible command line terminal thing. I want a GUI. How do we put a GUI on Arch? So in the next video, we'll continue this and I'll show you how we can put a lovely GNOME type interface, because again, there are a few commands that we have to go through to do that, but that will be a quick one. Anyway, so 222, hang on if my phone comes up. Anyway, so the Young Wolf 077, this was for you. So again, in this video, just to summarize, I've showed you how to install the latest version of Archibald Linux, ArchLinux 2025.02.1.1 on VMware Workstation 17.6.2. And this was requested once again by the Young Wolf 077 3 days ago in the comments. So if you've liked this video, then please thumbs up and subscribe. But again, if you not likey, then please thumbs down. But whatever you do, please subscribe. Thanks very much for watching and joining me at VMware Hancock's half hour. My name is Andy. I know a few of you out there have been sort of kind of responding to hey Hancock, which sort of kind of reminds me really of my school days. But anyway, my name's Andy, and again, you know, if there is a video out there that you would like to see on Hancock's VMware half hour, then just please drop me a note in the description. I'll try and put all these steps in the YouTube description as I have them there. As I said, this is a recipe that I have been using for many years. It works for me. And I'm hoping that if you follow these steps as I've shown, that it will also work for you. So again, please come back in another video when we'll follow on from this, where we look at basically putting a GUI on our ArchLinux installation. So once again, thank you very much for watching this particular video, and good night from me. Good night now. Bye bye.